My husband, who is 5 years younger than me, is babyish and craves excessive affection. He gets moody if he's not the center of attention. Eventually, he even got jealous of our newborn son. When my anger exploded, I left him and went back to my parents' house. So, what's my overly affectionate husband going to do now? I'm Maria. I'm 35 years old and a new mom to a 2-year-old boy. My husband, Daniel, is 35 years younger than me. We got married 4 years ago when I was 31 and Daniel was 26. I used to work as a truck driver for a local transportation company. I was born and raised in a rural area where you couldn't get by without a car, so I got my license as soon as I could. I found out that I liked driving more than I thought I would, and it felt like my calling. So, after high school, I joined a transportation company. At first, I delivered small packages with a mini truck, but eventually, I wanted more. I got my CDL Class A2 and started driving bigger trucks. Thanks to my strong physique, I often got the same recognition as the male drivers. As the eldest of 4 siblings, with 3 younger brothers, I was always the dependable big sister and popular among the girls. Some men said I was comforting like a mom, which I didn't appreciate. Who would be happy to be called mom-like by men more than 10 years older than them? Men who think women should just smile and nod at their stories and that it benefits them to do so didn't like me. But I wouldn't want those kinds of men anyway. So, at the transportation company, I was both liked and feared. Daniel, who would later become my husband, graduated from college and became a company employee, but he quit due to the toxic work environment and a spiteful boss. Then, he joined our company as a driver. Even transportation companies have bad bosses and annoying coworkers, but we were lucky to have a friendly office. We usually can't go out drinking due to the job, but we sometimes go out together before a day off. Daniel's welcome party was also held at a nearby bar. I heard you're a veteran driver, Maria. That's so cool. I remember him saying that. Daniel is just a bit taller than me, but he's skinny, and I clearly outweigh him. He's not handsome, but with his clean look and hairstyle, he gives off a handsome impression. He often hung around me when he started working, so I took care of him. I couldn't see Daniel, who was the same age as my youngest brother, as a romantic interest at first. Do you have a boyfriend, Maria? One day, Daniel asked me. No, not right now. I was already 30. In my mid-20s, I had considered marrying someone, but I found out he was a mama's boy, so I called it off. Since then, I've found it bothersome to get married or date men. Most of the men who approach me seem to be looking for a mother figure. Can I be a candidate then? He said it straight, and I didn't feel bad about it, but I didn't want to get involved in office romance or be accused of seducing a younger guy. Well, Daniel, you're the same age as my youngest brother. It's hard to see you as a romantic partner. Then test me. If you don't like me, I'll give up. I don't dislike you. If I did, I wouldn't take care of you. Great. Then let's go on a date. A date. Daniel is sociable and somewhat forcefully invited me out, and soon we started going places together on our days off. We visited zoos, aquariums, amusement parks, went bowling, watched baseball games, and sometimes even went to circuits to watch races. As we kept dating, I grew fond of the friendly Daniel and eventually we became romantically involved. I no longer saw him as a little brother. We tried to keep it a secret at work, but Daniel wasn't good at hiding things, so our colleagues quickly found out. So Maria likes younger guys, huh? My boss is Tom, who had been looking out for me since I joined the company, said that. He was a supervisor back then, but is now the section manager. It's not that I like them. I just get along with that type. Maria, you're reliable. I've been told I'm reliable and dependable since I was a kid, but I've never been called cute or someone you want to protect. I came to accept that and even tried to act more masculine. Daniel, on the other hand, said, "Maria, you're powerful and really cool. You're handsome." I guess he meant it as a compliment, but it's not something you usually say to a woman. Still, I didn't feel bad about it. Daniel might be a bit unreliable, but he's good at his job, personable, and knows how to get along with people. After dating for about a year, when Daniel proposed, I had no reason to refuse. When we went to a family meeting at Daniel's house, his mother, Catherine, said, "You seem like a very dependable woman." It was hard to tell if it was a compliment. "Daniel is an only child and a bit spoiled, but please take care of him." I decided to take it as acceptance of me as a reliable marriage partner. We didn't want a wedding or reception, so we had a party at a rented restaurant. It was just a drinking party. Our honeymoon wasn't overseas. We spent 2 nights and 3 days relaxing at a luxury hotel. Even after getting married, I continued working. Daniel would do the cleaning, laundry, shopping, anything I asked him to do. But he would never do them without being told. He had been used to his mother doing everything for him, so it couldn't be helped. At least he did what I asked. However, Daniel turned out to be more babyish and craved excessive affection more than I had thought. He always wanted to cling to me. Honestly, I'm not very good at physical affection, so when I tried to come up with reasons to get away from him, he would immediately sulk. When we were together, if he wasn't the center of attention, he would get grumpy. When we watched TV together and I said, "This actor is handsome," he would blatantly become unhappy. Then he would start bad-mouthing the actor. I couldn't stand that. Even so, our newlywed life was enjoyable enough. Until I got pregnant and had a child. When I found out I was pregnant, I kept it a secret for a while. I wanted to keep working, and I also wanted a child, so I was unsure what to do. Transportation is undeniably a tough job for women. There are clearly more male drivers, and it's not an easy workplace for women, especially those with children. I told my boss, Tom, about my pregnancy when I was already 5 months along and in the stable period. "Congratulations. But don't push yourself too hard while you're pregnant. What if something happened? The company would also be held accountable." I got scolded. But if I could make an excuse, I think pregnant women commuting by packed trains every day have it harder. I commute by car and work in a truck. Loading and unloading are tough, but with a dolly, I manage. "That's because you're sturdy, Maria." When my wife found out she was pregnant, she said she felt unwell and couldn't do much around the house. Morning sickness varies from person to person. Anyway, now that I know, I can't let you continue working as you are. "What? Am I getting fired?" I panicked, but that wasn't the case. "Of course not. You're a valuable asset to us, Maria." Tom laughed. He asked me to handle internal duties until I gave birth, so I could work until just before the delivery. The internal duties involved dispatching drivers via radio, not office work. We also want to increase the number of female drivers in our company. More customers are asking for female drivers, and we plan to improve the environment, so don't push yourself too hard. Although our transportation company was medium-sized, the president had a surprisingly progressive mindset. I would be happy if we could create a workplace where female drivers could work comfortably. That night, I told Daniel about my pregnancy and work situation, but instead of being happy, he got quite upset. "Why did you tell the company before me? And deciding to keep working without consulting me? Do you think I'm unreliable?" I really was at fault for this. I should have told him first. Solving everything on my own is both my strength and my weakness. I apologized profusely and managed to get him to calm down. After that, the drivers said I was precise but scary, as I worked until just before the delivery. The company set up a daycare on site with a mobile home. One of the drivers' wives, who had a daycare license, agreed to help part-time. When we advertised, welcoming female drivers with daycare available, Tom was delighted to receive a large number of applications. Now I could work and raise my child. I thought everything was going well. I safely gave birth to a baby boy. Is this really my kid? Daniel didn't seem very happy and didn't try to get involved in child-rearing. On the contrary, he would get grumpy whenever I took care of the baby. Could he possibly be unhappy because he wasn't the center of my attention? But he's a father. How could he be jealous of his own child? It seemed ridiculous, but I tried to avoid making Daniel unhappy. While I had helped my mother take care of my 3 younger brothers, taking care of a baby was new to me. Feeding every 3 hours made me realize how hard being a mother was, and I appreciated my own mother even more. Babies can only express themselves by crying, so they cry a lot. Each time, Daniel would say, "It's noisy," and get grumpy. Of course, he wouldn't try to soothe the baby. When I picked up the baby to calm him down, Daniel would say, "There you go again. The baby gets all the attention while I'm always ignored." When I was breastfeeding, he even said, "Great, now the baby has taken over. That used to be mine." I was dumbfounded. Why don't you start acting like a father? He's your child, you know. I know, but boys aren't cute. If only it were a girl. What is this man even saying? One time, after giving birth, we were cuddling for the first time in a while. Our son started crying, and when I went to soothe him, Daniel yelled, "Who do you care about more, me or the baby?" and threw the remote. Luckily, it didn't hit our son, but I never expected him to say something like that. I was too shocked to respond. If I did, of course, I would have said, "The baby." Daniel, being an only child, didn't like my family. I thought it was because there were too many people and he felt uneasy, but it might be more than that. Maybe he didn't like not being the center of attention. "Maria, he looks just like you." When I visited my family, my brothers crowded around the baby, making a fuss. I had brought the baby right after giving birth, but newborns don't really resemble anyone. Now that he could hold his head up and was more stable, our son looked just like me. My family is a big one, with my parents, my 3 brothers, their wives, and their children all living together. You might think it's tough, but it's not. That's because the first brother's wife's friends married the other 2 younger brothers. They were friends from the start, so they get along well even after marriage. My mom is an easygoing person, so everyone says what they want and gets along. 2 years ago, my 3 brothers cooperated to build a house. When I started complaining angrily, my brothers and their wives all began to give their opinions. Taking care of a baby is hard, so it's natural that the husband gets pushed aside a bit. They said, "We understand, but it still feels isolating." My brothers admitted. But eventually, when the baby starts talking and calls you dad, you'll feel happy and become more aware of being a father. That was the conclusion. I thought that might be the case, and decided to give Daniel a bit more leeway for a while. I dedicated myself to childcare until our child turned 1, then returned to work as a dispatcher. I was eager to drive again, but I was grateful to work near my child. I didn't intend to neglect my husband, but honestly, my son was incredibly cute. It was amazing how much I adored this little being who looked just like me. But raising a child with a father who doesn't love them is tough. Daniel says he would have liked a girl, but who knows if he's serious. Besides, there's no guarantee the next child will be a girl. Even now, Daniel acts so childish that it's hard to tell who the real child is. Imagining what it would be like after having a second child gave me a headache. I found myself sighing more often. That evening, as usual, I cooked dinner while feeding our son his baby food. Daniel seemed annoyed that I was tending to our son throughout the meal. Then he suddenly said, "I want to marry a new woman instead of old Maria." I thought it was just another one of his ploys, but my patience had reached its limit. "I might just divorce you and remarry a younger woman. If there was such a woman, I would be totally fine with that. There are plenty of younger and cuter women." "Sure, there are. I'm already 35, and I've never been called cute or lovable. I couldn't imagine a young and cute woman putting up with someone who craves so much attention." "Fine. Then leave." "What? You want a divorce, right? This was my apartment to begin with, so go ahead and leave." "Wait a minute. No way. Women get so emotional." He tried to pass it off as a joke, with a strained smile. "I'm not emotional at all. You want to remarry a young, cute woman, right? Go ahead." "Come on, it was a joke. Just what?" "I just feel lonely because you're always focused on the baby." "A mother prioritizing her child is natural. The baby can't survive without care. Daniel, you're an adult. You can survive without being taken care of." That's so harsh. I rarely get angry, so he was probably surprised. A grown man was tearing up. I felt no sympathy. Instead, I was angry. "If you won't leave, then I will. I'm not asking for alimony, but you should at least pay child support." As I quickly packed my belongings and prepared to leave with my son, he pleaded, "Don't go, Maria! Are you abandoning me?" He tried to cling to me as he said that. Ignoring him, I left and went back to my parents' house. That does sound annoying. "Maria, you can manage on your own, even with a child. Men just don't get it. No matter how dependable a woman is, she wants to be cared for sometimes." "That's right. Being a single mother is tough." "Maria, stay here as long as you like. Why not just move back here permanently?" When I explained the situation to my family, my brothers and their wives all started talking at once. As I expected, the women in this house are stronger. Since my 3 brothers built the house together, it has 3 stories and plenty of rooms. They even installed an elevator, thinking about our parents' old age. There are 7 children between the ages of 3 and 10, so my son would have playmates, and the wives, who work part-time, and my mother, or someone else, is always around. It's a great environment for raising a child. Even though I moved out of the apartment and back to my parents' house, Daniel and I still worked at the same place. I'd like to return to driving since my family is helping with childcare. My boss, Tom, readily agreed. I had been eager to return to driving, and being out on deliveries meant I would see less of Daniel. When I spotted him from a distance, I quickly got into my car or went to the bathroom to avoid him. If I did run into him at the office, I completely ignored his attempts to talk. About 10 days later, Tom asked, "Is something wrong? Daniel's been off his game lately. We've been getting a lot of complaints about him." Even from a distance, I had noticed he looked much thinner and pale. He was reportedly making mistakes, delivering the wrong packages, and behaving poorly with customers. Reluctantly, I explained the situation to Tom. "This is problematic. No matter what's going on, you can't let personal issues affect your work. If this continues, one of you might have to leave." "I'm sorry for the trouble. I'll talk to him." Daniel might be the one to lose his job due to his mistakes, but that would be unpleasant. Moreover, if we were to divorce, we'd need to handle it properly. I need to talk to you. When I spoke to Daniel as he was getting ready to leave, he spun around to face me. Finally, you're talking to me. He looked at me with tearful eyes. Daniel, you've lost a lot of weight. Are you eating properly? Are you worried about me? I lost my appetite after you left, and cooking is a hassle. You should have gone back to your parents' house. I had assumed Daniel would quickly go home to have Catherine take care of him. But if I went back home, it would have felt like the end for us. That might be true. If we both returned to our parents, it could mean divorce. Those puppy dog eyes looking at me are manipulative. If it was going to come to this, why did he say those things? Bringing personal issues into work and making mistakes is unacceptable. Shouldn't you be working hard to remarry a young, cute woman? It might have been a bit mean, but I was hurt too. There is no such woman. I need Maria. This isn't a conversation we should be having at work. The drivers and office staff were trying to eavesdrop from a distance. Just do your job properly. If you can become someone I can rely on, maybe I'll reconsider. I quickly left the office after saying that. My brothers teased. If you're waiting for Daniel to become reliable, you'll be waiting until he's over 60. After that, Daniel visibly put in a lot of effort at work. 3 months later, Tom said, "Isn't it time to forgive him?" But even if we lived together again, there was no guarantee he wouldn't repeat the same behavior. I couldn't bring myself to live with someone who didn't love our son as a father should. Half a year after our separation, on a Sunday, Daniel suddenly showed up at my parents' house. His head was completely shaved. What happened to your hair? I was trying to figure out how to show I'm truly sorry. This was all I could think of. I'm really sorry. He deeply apologized at the entrance. It must have been a big decision for Daniel, who always maintained a handsome appearance with his hairstyle. And it didn't suit him at all. I almost laughed and, to cover it up, I said to my son in my arms, "That's Dad. Isn't his head funny?" Then, my son, who had just started to speak, reached out to Daniel and said, "Dad." Daniel's face at that moment was priceless. Is he calling me Dad? It seems so. Even if you're distant, he still thinks of you as his father. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for being a terrible father. As Daniel took our son from me and hugged him, I couldn't help but cry. This was the sight I had longed to see. Will you come back? Daniel asked cautiously while holding our son. Are you someone I can rely on now? I was embarrassed to be seen crying, so I said it like that. Maybe not yet, but... All right. I have one condition. If you accept it, I will consider getting back together. Anything. I'll accept any condition to make things right. Daniel's expression brightened. The condition I gave was for Daniel to live with me at my parents' house. I had already talked to my family about the possibility. My parents, brothers, and their wives were supportive and said they would help in any way they could. They might have just found it amusing. When I brought it up, Daniel looked scared and anxious before softly saying, "Okay." It must have been a big adjustment for him. He had been spoiled as an only child. Even after we got married, I had spoiled him. But in this house, with many children needing attention, there was no room to pamper an adult man. In the beginning, Daniel was scared and lost. He couldn't cling to me in front of the kids. But gradually, things changed. He realized that being needed and cared for was not a bad feeling. Even though no one clung to him, there was always someone around to talk to or have a drink with. Eventually, his feelings of loneliness disappeared. My brother's wives gave him strict lessons. The baby is crying. Diaper. What? Maria. Maria will. You're the father. Do it yourself. It seems I can trust my brother's wives to handle his growth as a father. By the way, I remember wanting siblings as a kid. I never imagined I'd suddenly have 6. Daniel said cheerfully as he prepared for the next day. My brothers were planning to take the kids fishing. My sisters-in-law and I planned to leave the 2 youngest with our parents and enjoy shopping and lunch. I had never been interested in fashion, but thanks to my sisters-in-law, I started to enjoy it. Maria, you look great in these clothes because you're tall, they said, enjoying themselves. I lost about 22 pounds after giving birth, and I found that I could wear almost anything. In my late 30s, I started to enjoy dressing up. You've been looking quite beautiful lately. Daniel's compliment didn't feel bad at all. Daniel, you've become a reliable father. After everything, our family is happy and united now. Soon, we might have another addition to our big family.
In the midst of a sunny neighborhood, my small art studio sat snugly between 2 tall buildings. My name is Amelia, and this studio was my refuge. As I looked around, the familiar sight of paintbrushes, messy palettes, and canvases in various stages of completion greeted me. Here, I felt truly alive, losing myself in the world of colors and forms. Walking in through the door was my husband, Alex, his tall frame barely fitting through the doorway. His dark hair was a mess, probably from running his fingers through it all day at work, but his bright blue eyes always had a hint of mischief. "Hey," he said with a tired smile, dropping his briefcase by the door. "How was your day?" I sighed, looking over at a particular canvas. "It was good, but I'm struggling with this piece. I can't seem to get it right." Alex walked over, taking a closer look. "I think it's great," he said, trying to be supportive. "But what do I know? I can barely draw a stick figure." I chuckled. "Thanks for trying to make me feel better." Before we could continue, the sharp ring of the phone interrupted us. I picked it up, already dreading the voice I'd hear. Sure enough, it was Evelyn, my mother-in-law. "Hello, Amelia," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "How are you?" "I'm fine, Evelyn. What can I do for you?" I replied, trying to keep the annoyance out of my voice. "I just wanted to see how my son is doing," she said. "Is he there?" Alex gestured for the phone, mouthing, "I'll handle it." Before handing it over, I couldn't resist a little jab. "He's here, and he's great. He always enjoys coming home to a supportive environment." There was a pause on the other end. "Well," she finally responded, "just make sure he stays that way. Put him on." Alex took the phone from me, shooting me a look that said, "Please don't start." "Hi, Mom," he began, and I tuned out the rest of their conversation, turning my attention back to my painting. After hanging up, Alex turned to me. "She's coming over tomorrow." I groaned. "Why? Does she need more ammunition to mock my art?" Alex put his arm around me. "I'll talk to her, okay? Just try to be civil." The next day, Evelyn arrived, and her entrance was as grand as always. Tall, with striking gray hair, she had an air of superiority that she wore like a second skin. "Hello, Amelia," she said, scanning the room with disdain. "Hello, Evelyn," I responded, gritting my teeth. Her eyes settled on my latest work. "What's this?" she asked, pointing at it. "It looks like a child's mess." I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm. "It's a work in progress." Evelyn smirked. "Isn't everything here?" "I don't know why Alex supports this hobby of yours." "It's not a hobby," I retorted. "It's my passion." Alex walked in, sensing the tension. "Ladies, can we please not do this today?" Evelyn scoffed. "I just don't see why you waste your time, Amelia. My son deserves better." With that, she turned and left the room. I sank into a chair, feeling deflated. Alex sat next to me, squeezing my hand. "Ignore her, okay? Your art is amazing." I looked into his eyes, feeling grateful for his support. "Thanks," I whispered. Life with Evelyn was like navigating a field of landmines. Every interaction was a potential explosion, and most days I felt emotionally drained by her constant jabs. Her favorite topic, of course, was my art. She never passed an opportunity to belittle it or ridicule me. One Sunday afternoon, Alex and I were in our living room. The sunlight streamed through our window, casting a warm glow across the room. I was sketching a new idea while Alex read a book. The peaceful moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. "I'll get it," Alex said, setting his book down. He opened the door to reveal Evelyn holding a pie. "I was in the neighborhood," she began, a hint of a smile on her lips. "Thought I'd drop by." "Thanks, Mom," Alex replied, taking the pie from her. "Come on in." I forced a smile. "Hello, Evelyn." She scanned the room, her gaze stopping at my sketchbook. "More scribbles, Amelia?" "It's a concept sketch," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Evelyn smirked. "I'll never understand modern art. It all looks so pointless." Alex intervened. "Mom, can you please be respectful?" She shrugged. "I'm just giving my opinion." "I didn't ask for it," I retorted. Evelyn leaned in closer, her voice dripping with condescension. "I just worry about Alex. What kind of future will he have with a wife who spends her time drawing? Whatever this is." Alex stood up, placing himself between Evelyn and me. "Enough, Mom. Amelia's work is important. Just because you don't understand it doesn't mean it's worthless." Evelyn feigned surprise. "I'm just concerned for my son." I stood up. "And I'm concerned for my mental well-being. I don't need your negativity." Evelyn huffed. "Fine, I'll leave." As she made her way to the door, she stopped and turned. "One day, Alex will see you for who you truly are." I watched as she left, trying to shake off the weight of her words. Alex wrapped his arm around my shoulder. "I'm sorry about her." I sighed. "It's not your fault. I just wish she could see that there's value in what I do." Alex smiled. "She may never see it, but I do, and I'll always be here to support you." The days following Evelyn's visit were tense. I found solace in my art, pouring all my emotions onto the canvas. Alex watched me work, always encouraging, always there. One evening, as the sun began to set, painting our room in hues of gold and crimson, my phone buzzed on the table. An unknown number flashed across the screen. Picking it up, I hesitated for a moment. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was soft and pleasant. "Is this Amelia?" "Yes, speaking." "Hello, Amelia. My name is Rebecca. I'm with the Ashton Art Gallery. We came across your work online and are very impressed." I blinked in surprise. The Ashton Art Gallery was one of the premier spots for modern art in the city. "Really?" was all I could manage. Rebecca chuckled. "Yes, really. We'd like to meet and discuss a potential exhibition." A wave of emotion washed over me. "I'd love to." "Great," Rebecca continued. "How about this Friday at 3 p.m.? "That works for me." "Perfect. See you then. And Amelia, keep doing what you're doing. Your art is truly special." Hanging up, I turned to Alex, my face beaming. "You won't believe who that was." He looked up, curious. "Who?" "The Ashton Art Gallery. They want to discuss an exhibition for my paintings." Alex's eyes widened in surprise, and he pulled me into a hug. "That's amazing. I knew they'd notice your talent." I laughed. "I still can't believe it." He pulled back, his face serious. "You deserve this, Amelia. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The news was like a shot of energy. I spent the next few days preparing, researching the gallery, and planning which pieces to discuss. The day of the meeting arrived, and I dressed carefully, choosing a simple but professional outfit. As I was about to leave, the phone rang again. Hesitating for a moment, I answered, "Hello?" It was Evelyn. "Amelia," she began, her tone different than usual, almost jealous. "I heard about the gallery." I was taken aback. "Yes, it's true," she scoffed. "We'll see how long that lasts." Resisting the urge to snap back, I replied calmly, "Thanks for the encouragement, Evelyn." She hung up without another word. Alex walked over, hearing the tail end of the conversation. "Don't let her get to you. Today's your day." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "You're right. Let's go." Walking into the Ashton Art Gallery, I was taken aback by its sheer grandeur. Walls adorned with vibrant paintings, sculptures strategically placed, and the subtle hum of quiet conversations filled the air. Rebecca, a tall woman with short, curly hair, greeted us with a warm smile. "Amelia, so good to meet you," she said, extending her hand. I shook it, my nerves still tingling. "Thank you for having me." Rebecca led us through the gallery, pointing out specific spots where she envisioned my paintings. "Your work," she began, "has this raw energy that we believe our audience will resonate with." I looked at Alex, who gave me an encouraging nod. "Thank you, Rebecca. That means a lot." She smiled. "Now, let's discuss the specifics. We were thinking of dedicating an entire section to your work for the upcoming exhibit." "That sounds incredible," I replied. Rebecca handed me a folder. "Here's a layout of the gallery and a tentative schedule. We need your pieces here by next month." I flipped through the pages, trying to mask my excitement. "This is thorough. I'll get started right away." The rest of the meeting was a whirlwind of discussions, from lighting preferences to wall colors. By the end, my head was spinning, but in the best possible way. As Alex and I walked back to our car, he turned to me, his eyes gleaming. "You did it!" I laughed. "We did it. I couldn't have done this without you." He grinned. "Now comes the hard part, selecting and preparing your pieces." Over the next few weeks, our apartment turned into a hive of activity. I was in a zone, finalizing paintings, choosing frames, and coordinating with the gallery. Every surface was covered with art supplies and sketches. One evening, while I was working on a particularly intricate piece, the doorbell rang. Alex went to answer it, and moments later, he returned with a familiar face. "Evelyn," I said, surprised. She looked around, taking in the chaos. "So, this is what preparation looks like." I hesitated for a moment, then replied, "Yes, it's a lot of work." Evelyn's eyes landed on a painting I had just finished. "This one's different." I walked over. "It's a new direction I'm trying." She studied it for a moment, her expression unreadable. Interesting." Before I could respond, Alex intervened. "Mom, why are you here?" Evelyn sighed. "I wanted to see what all the fuss was about." I took a deep breath. "I'm proud of my work, Evelyn." She nodded. "It's evident. Well, I should be going." As she left, I felt a mix of emotions. While it wasn't praise, Evelyn's visit wasn't as confrontational as our previous encounters. Alex wrapped his arm around me. "She's trying, in her own way." I smiled weakly. Let's hope. The days flew by, and soon it was time to move the paintings to the gallery. With each piece I packed, I felt a combination of excitement and anxiety. "This is it," I whispered to Alex as we loaded the last painting into the van. He squeezed my hand. "You're ready, and I can't wait for the world to see your brilliance." The day before the exhibition was a blur of activity. The gallery was bustling with staff setting up lighting, positioning paintings, and ensuring everything was perfect. Alex and I arrived early, watching in awe as my artwork was given prime positioning. Rebecca approached us, clipboard in hand. "Amelia, it's all coming together wonderfully. Your pieces are truly the highlight." I smiled, feeling a surge of pride. "Thank you, Rebecca. This means the world to me." She nodded, making a few notes. "The press will be here tomorrow. This is a significant opportunity for you." As the day wore on, I took a moment to sit, absorbing the surroundings. The realization hit me. I was about to have my first major art exhibition. This was a dream come true, and I was overwhelmed with gratitude. Alex came over, handing me a coffee. "Deep in thought?" I looked up, smiling. "Just taking it all in. It's a lot." He sat down next to me. "You deserve every bit of this, Amelia. I'm so proud of you." I leaned into him, grateful for his unwavering support. "Thank you, Alex." Our moment was interrupted by a call. My phone lit up with an unknown number. Curious, I answered. "Amelia?" A voice crackled. "Yes, who's this?" There was a pause, then a familiar voice sneered, "It's Evelyn." I stiffened. "What do you want?" She chuckled. "Just wanted to wish you luck for tomorrow." Despite her words, there was an unmistakable tone of mockery. "Thanks," I replied curtly, ready to end the call. But Evelyn continued, "Actually, there's more. I visited your apartment today." My heart sank. "What did you do, Evelyn?" She laughed. "Let's just say I improved a few of your pieces." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You did what?" Evelyn's voice was dripping with malice. "You'll see soon enough." She hung up before I could say anything else. Panicking, I turned to Alex. "She's been to our apartment. She's done something to my paintings." His face darkened. "Let's go home. Now." We raced back, anxiety mounting with each passing minute. As we entered our apartment, the devastation was clear. Several of my paintings were destroyed. Splashes of paint, torn canvases, and scribbles marred my artwork. I sank to the floor, tears streaming down my face. How could she? Alex knelt beside me, equally shocked. "We'll get through this, Amelia." But amidst the destruction, a realization dawned on me. The best pieces, the ones meant for the exhibition, were already at the gallery. Evelyn had ruined some paintings, yes, but not the ones for the exhibition. A plan formed in my mind. Wiping away my tears, I looked up at Alex. "She thinks she's won, but she hasn't. We have an exhibition tomorrow, and it will be a success." He nodded, determination in his eyes. "You're right. Let's focus on that." The day of the exhibition had arrived. I was nervous, but the events of the previous day had given me a newfound determination. Alex looked at me, offering a comforting smile. "You ready for this?" I took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. The gallery was soon teeming with visitors. Reporters, art enthusiasts, and curious onlookers walked around, admiring the pieces. The positive murmurs and awed expressions of the crowd boosted my confidence. Rebecca approached, her face glowing with excitement. "Amelia, this is beyond expectation. The response is phenomenal." I grinned. "Thank you, Rebecca. It's all thanks to your support." As the day progressed, I was pleasantly surprised to see many familiar faces. Friends, family, and even a few old colleagues came by to show their support. Midway through the exhibition, an elegantly dressed man approached me. "Amelia, I'm Charles. I've heard so much about your work, and I must say, it's even better in person." I blushed. "Thank you, Charles." He looked around, his gaze settling on a particularly vibrant piece. "This one? I'd like to purchase it." I was taken aback. "Really?" Charles nodded. "Absolutely, and not just this one. I'd like to buy a few more." I was elated, hardly believing my luck. Alex joined us, equally thrilled. "This is incredible, Amelia." As we finalized the details with Charles, there was a commotion at the entrance. Evelyn had arrived, smugness evident on her face. She walked over, her eyes scanning the gallery. "So, this is your big day?" I met her gaze evenly. "Yes, Evelyn, and it's going better than I could have hoped." She smirked. "I see. Well, enjoy it while it lasts." Just as I was about to reply, Charles interjected, "You must be the infamous Evelyn. I've heard a lot about you." Evelyn looked him up and down. "And who might you be?" Charles extended his hand. "Charles Montgomery. I've just purchased some of Amelia's artwork." Evelyn's smugness faded, replaced by surprise. "You bought these?" Charles nodded. "Yes, and I must say, they're some of the best pieces I've seen in a long time." Evelyn was at a loss for words. The realization that someone of Charles's stature admired my work was a hard pill to swallow. I decided it was time to turn the tables. "Evelyn, remember those paintings you improved at our apartment?" She raised an eyebrow. "What about them?" I smiled. "Charles bought those too." Charles added, "And I intend to press charges for the damage to my property." Evelyn paled, her confidence shattered. "You can't be serious." Charles looked at her sternly. "I am. I value art, and what you did was criminal." Evelyn looked like she was about to crumble. I didn't know." I stepped forward. Now you do. Maybe you'll think twice before meddling in others' lives. After the whirlwind of Evelyn's confrontation, the gallery buzzed even more. I had to take a moment to breathe and center myself. The sheer number of people attending and the success of the sales was mind-boggling. Alex came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "How are you holding up?" I leaned into his embrace. "Better than I thought. But God, Alex, the sheer number of people." He chuckled. "They're here for you. All for you." Rebecca sidled up next to us, a glass of champagne in hand. "You two are the stars tonight. And Amelia, the critics are raving." Taking a sip of her drink, she continued, "I've had 3 other gallery owners approach me already, asking about you. The next big thing," they said. I blinked in surprise, struggling to process the information. "Really?" She nodded, her eyes twinkling. "Really, prepare yourself for a lot more attention after tonight." A familiar voice called out, "There's the artist of the evening!" I turned to see my old college friend, Lisa, striding over with a big smile on her face. Pulling me into a hug, she said, "I always knew you'd make it big, Amy." I laughed. "It's still Amelia to you, but thank you, Lisa. It's been too long." As the night wore on, I chatted with countless visitors, some who knew about art, some who didn't, and some who just came to show their support. Each interaction was a reminder of the journey I had taken to get here. Around midnight, the crowd began to thin. The gallery's lights dimmed slightly, casting a warm, ambient glow over the remaining guests. That's when I noticed a familiar face standing by one of my paintings, studying it intently. "Uncle Richard?" I approached hesitantly. We hadn't spoken in years. He turned to me, his eyes slightly moist. "Hello, Amelia. It's been a while." Not knowing what to say, I simply replied, "Yes, it has." He looked back at the painting, a piece I had done of our old family home. "This takes me back," he murmured. We talked for a long time, reminiscing about old times and catching up on new ones. The rift that had formed in our family after a dispute over inheritance had kept us apart. But that night, in front of my artwork, barriers were broken. By the time the gallery closed, my feet were sore and my voice was hoarse. But the joy in my heart was unparalleled. Alex, ever the doting husband, carried some of my stuff as we headed out. As we drove home, he glanced over at me. "You did it, Amelia. You proved them all wrong." I leaned my head against the window, the city lights streaming past. "It's just the beginning, Alex. Just the beginning." The sun filtered through the curtains as I sipped my morning coffee. Last night's exhibition success still buzzed in my mind, and the feeling of satisfaction lingered. Alex was reading the morning paper when the phone rang. Picking up, I was met with a familiar, shaky voice. "Amelia, it's Evelyn." My guard went up immediately. "What do you want?" "To apologize," she began, desperation evident in her voice. "I've seen the error of my ways, especially after the success of your exhibition." "Why now, after everything?" I asked, my voice icy. "The buyer of the paintings has filed a lawsuit. It's substantial. I was hoping if maybe you could talk to him, persuade him to drop the charges." She was almost pleading. I took a deep breath. "You expect me to bail you out after everything you've done?" "I'm genuinely sorry," she insisted. "That might be, but actions have consequences, Evelyn," I responded coldly. "Please, Amelia, think about it," she urged, before I ended the call. Days later, the court's decision came through. Evelyn was ordered to pay the full cost of the spoiled paintings and a hefty fine for property damage. The verdict didn't surprise me. She had openly admitted to the act, after all. Word reached me that Evelyn had tried to appeal for leniency, but to no avail. The damage was done. Soon after, Evelyn ceased all communications with me. The silence was, in many ways, a relief. With her out of the picture, my life regained its balance. My career flourished, and Alex and I continued to strengthen our bond. The ordeal with Evelyn was a harsh reminder that life was filled with challenges, but also that every cloud had a silver lining. Sometimes, justice did prevail.
My life took a weird turn the day Mrs. Baker walked into our store, right when I was stacking some plates. "I grew up here, you know?" Since I was a kid, I've been helping my parents at our family tableware shop, learning the ropes of running a small business. It was cozy, filled with the clink of porcelain and the warm smiles of regulars. But that day, something was different. "Emma," my dad called out from behind the counter, waving me over. Mrs. Baker, the owner of the bakery next door, was with him, a stern look on her face that didn't match her usual cheery public persona. I wiped my hands on my apron and approached them. "What's up, Dad?" "Mrs. Baker here has a proposal," Dad said, shooting a glance that seemed a mix of confusion and curiosity. She didn't waste any time. "Emma, I've been talking to your father about a potential partnership between our two businesses." I raised an eyebrow, crossing my arms. "A partnership? Like, what, turning the bakery and the shop into some sort of megastore?" "Exactly," she nodded sharply. "And there's more. I think it would be a good idea if you and my son, Michael, got to know each other better." I choked on my own breath. "Wait, what? Michael? Why?" "It's simple," she snapped, her voice firm, almost commanding. "Michael and you getting together would make this business merger smooth." "It makes sense, Emma. Think about the potential." I looked over at Dad, who seemed just as stunned but intrigued. "You're talking about a marriage merger? Like in the movies?" "Yeah," Mrs. Baker continued. "It's all for the business, sweetheart. You two could be a power couple, the face of a new joint venture. It's practical." Dad nudged me gently. "Emma, just meet him. No harm in that, right?" I sighed, looking from my dad's hopeful face to Mrs. Baker's stern one. "Fine. I'll meet him. But I'm not promising anything more than that." "Good," Mrs. Baker smiled, her expression softening just a bit. "He's coming by tomorrow. You'll see, it might work out." The next day, true to her word, Michael came into the shop. He was taller than I expected, with a kind smile and a way of moving that was confident but not overbearing. We talked over coffee, surrounded by the clinks of our store, and I had to admit, he was nothing like his mother, polite, funny, and surprisingly down to earth. "So, your mom tells me we're supposed to save the family businesses by getting hitched?" I joked, trying to keep the mood light. He laughed, a genuine, hearty sound. "Yeah, she has a way of putting things, doesn't she? Look, I know this is weird, but I think we could make a good team, in business at least." I found myself nodding, more taken with him than I wanted to admit. "Maybe. If the business side of things works out." As he left, I couldn't shake the feeling that this crazy idea might just work, or at the very least, it wouldn't be boring. Marrying Michael had felt like stepping into a whirlwind. Before I knew it, our businesses were smashed together into one big store. It sounded good on paper, but living it was another story. Mrs. Baker had her fingers in every pie, literally and figuratively. It wasn't long before she started calling the shots at the store, her store now, I guess. One Monday morning, I was setting up the display when Mrs. Baker stomped in, her heels clicking loudly against the tile floor. "Emma, those plates go in the back. The front is for the pastries now," she barked, not even a good morning. I bit back my irritation. "Sure, Mrs. Baker. I'll move them. And call me Janice, we're family now," she said, but it sounded less like a warm invitation and more like a command. I shuffled the plates to the back, muttering under my breath. The change was more than just physical space, it was in everything. I wasn't just selling tableware now. I was up to my elbows in flour and sugar, helping with the pastries when the baker called in sick, which seemed to happen more than it should. One afternoon, while I was wiping down tables, Michael came over, a rare sight since he mostly handled the bakery's supply side. "How's it going, Em?" he asked, leaning on a clean table. I shrugged, keeping it cool. "Just peachy. I never imagined I'd know so much about pastries." He chuckled, scratching his neck. "Yeah, Mom can be a bit much. But she knows the business, you know?" I nodded, though I didn't completely agree. "Sure, she knows her stuff. But I feel more like I'm just another one of her employees, not a partner. Michael frowned slightly. It's just the way she does things, Em. Give it time, she'll ease up. I doubted that, but changed the subject. We talked a bit more about some minor tweaks to the menu before he was called away. Things didn't ease up. If anything, they got tighter. I found myself staying later, cleaning up after closing, something I never had to worry about before. One evening, I was finishing up, and Mrs. Baker was counting the day's earnings, her lips a thin line. "You missed a spot on the counter, Emma. And make sure those trays are spotless," she ordered without looking up from her papers. I cleaned the spot she mentioned, my hands moving automatically. "Janice, I was thinking, maybe we could try some new designs for the tableware, to match the pastries?" She barely glanced at me. "No need. The current ones sell fine. Focus on what's selling, Emma. That's the bottom line." Her words stung a bit. I was used to having ideas, being part of decisions. Now, it felt like I was just here to follow orders. I missed the old days, the old store, my old life. Moving in with my husband's parents wasn't my idea of a perfect setup, but Janice insisted it made sense. "Why waste money on rent when you can live here and help out more at the store?" she had said. Her house was just a short walk from our joint business, making it all too easy for me to spend most of my waking hours there. At first, things seemed okay. The bakery and store were booming, and revenue was up. I was busy, sure, but it felt like we were all pulling together for a common cause. That was until I realized the price I was paying. I had to drop out of college. "You won't need a degree to sell plates and pastries," Janice told me, dismissing my dreams as if they were crumbs on the table. One chilly morning, as I was arranging a new batch of ceramic teapots that had just arrived, Janice marched in, her eyes scanning the store like a general assessing their troops. "Emma, why are these teapots here?" "I told you, the new pastry display goes in this section," she said, her voice sharp, cutting through the morning calm. I sighed, pushing down the irritation bubbling inside me. "Sorry, Janice. I thought they'd catch more eyes here. I'll move them." She watched me, her arms crossed. "Look, Emma, I appreciate your ideas, but we need to focus on what sells. Pastries are selling, not these fancy teapots." I moved the teapots to the back, feeling a sting of frustration. It was becoming clear that my role here was more about following orders than bringing any of my own ideas to the table. Later that day, Dad came by the store. It was becoming a rare occurrence. He looked around quietly, a somber look on his face. We found a quiet corner, and I asked him straight up, "Dad, why don't you come by much anymore?" He sighed, looking tired. "Emma, things have changed. Janice has, well, she's taken over completely. I'm just in the way here." I frowned, confused and a bit angry. "But it's our store too. Can't you talk to her?" Dad shook his head. "It's not that simple. The contract we signed. I didn't look at it close enough. It's all tilted in her favor. I'm basically out of the loop." I clenched my fists, feeling betrayed. "That's not fair, Dad. We should do something about it." He patted my shoulder, trying to smile. "It's business, Emma. I guess I just got outplayed. Just try to get along, okay?" I nodded, though resentment simmered inside me. After Dad left, I went back to work, my thoughts chaotic with anger and helplessness. A few days later, Janice caught me rearranging some of the displays to make room for new stock. "Emma, what are you doing? I didn't approve this change," she snapped, her eyes narrowing. I stood my ground this time. "Janice, we need to make room for new stock. These items aren't selling. We can't just push pastries, people come here for variety." She stepped closer, her voice low and harsh. "Listen here, I know what I'm doing. This isn't some little game, Emma. It's a business. My business now. You do well to remember that." Her words hit hard, and I was left speechless as she walked away, leaving me to stew in my frustration. When the pandemic hit, it threw everyone into chaos, our store included. Sales nosedived as lockdowns kept our regulars tucked away at home. I remember standing in the middle of the eerily quiet store, feeling the weight of impending doom. It was clear we had to pivot, and fast, or we'd be another casualty of the crisis. One morning, I approached Janice, who was busy flipping through inventory lists that looked more depressing by the day. "Janice, we should take the store online," I suggested, trying to sound as confident as possible. "We can set up a delivery system. It might help us keep going until all this blows over." She looked up, skeptical. "Online, huh? And who's going to set that up? You?" "Yes, me. I've been reading about it. It's not that hard, and I think it's worth a shot," I responded, feeling my resolve harden. With a heavy sigh, Janice finally conceded. "Fine. Do what you can. But this better work, Emma." I threw myself into the project, learning everything from website design to logistics. Surprisingly, or maybe not, the online shift was a hit. Orders started rolling in, and it wasn't long before we were busier than we had been in months. I managed everything, from updating the website daily to coordinating with couriers, and it felt good to be proactive, to steer the ship through stormy waters. As the pandemic waned and life slowly edged back to normal, I had a new idea. "Janice, why don't we keep focusing on online sales and individual orders? It could be a new direction for us," I proposed one evening as we were tallying up the day's sales, which had shown a promising upturn thanks to the online orders. Janice didn't even look up from the books. "No, Emma. We're going back to how things were. That's enough of this online nonsense. It was a temporary fix, not a new business model." Michael was there too, nodding along to his mother's words. "Mom's right, Em. People will want to come back in person. Let's not fix what isn't broken." I bit my tongue, holding back a retort. It was frustrating. We had a golden opportunity to evolve, but they were too set in their ways to see it. A few weeks later, as we officially halted the online operations and focused on in-store traffic, I overheard Janice talking to a group of her friends in the store, laughing and boasting. Yes, it was quite a challenge, but I managed to keep the business afloat during the pandemic. We had to adapt, of course. I paused behind a shelf, my hands clenched into fists. The nerve of her, taking credit for my sleepless nights, my ideas, my hard work. It stung, but I swallowed my anger. Arguing wouldn't change her attitude, and it wasn't worth the drama. It was a gloomy Tuesday, rain pelting down so hard it drummed against the store windows like 1,000 tiny drums. Most folks were smart enough to stay indoors, but the shop was open, just in case. I was tidying up some displays near the entrance, lost in thought, when the bell over the door jingled sharply. A small girl, no older than 8, stood dripping in the doorway. Her coat was soaked through, hair plastered to her head, eyes wide and scared. I dropped the cloth I was holding and rushed over. "Hey there, sweetie, come on in. You're soaking wet," I said, guiding her gently inside. She shivered, clutching a small backpack to her chest. I got lost. I can't find my mom." "Don't worry, we'll find her, okay? Let's get you warmed up first," I reassured her, fetching a towel from the back to dry her off. As I was rubbing her hair dry, Janice stormed over, frowning deeply. "What's this, Emma? Why is this child here? She's dripping all over the floor." I frowned back, protective over the little girl. "She's lost, Janice. She needs help." Janice scoffed, waving dismissively at the girl. "She's probably just a beggar. We don't need this kind of trouble. Get her out of here before she scares away any customers." I stood up, feeling my temper rise. "She's a child, Janice. It's pouring outside. We can't just throw her out. Do I have to remind you that this is a business, not a charity?" Janice snapped, glaring at both of us. Before I could argue further, Michael walked in, catching the tail end of our conversation. "What's going on here?" His mom explained with an impatient gesture towards the girl. Emma wants to turn the store into a homeless shelter. I say she goes out the same way she came in. Michael looked at the girl, then at me, and sighed. Emma, Mom's right. We can't start taking in strays. It's bad for business. As the argument heated up, I made a decision. I couldn't leave her out there alone. Ignoring Janice's protests, I picked up the phone and dialed the local police station. The police arrived quickly, given the weather and the circumstance. One of the officers wrapped the girl in a warm blanket I had brought from the back. They thanked me for keeping her safe and took down some information. Before she left, the girl hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. Watching her leave with the officers, hopefully to be reunited with her family soon, I felt a mix of relief and frustration. Janice walked over, her expression hard. "I'll be docking your pay for the day, Emma. And you can clean up this mess yourself," she said coldly. I was too tired to argue. The rest of the day passed in a blur of scrubbing and silent treatment from Janice and Michael. Their attitude stung, but holding that scared, grateful girl in my arms, I knew I'd done the right thing, no matter what they thought. It was a regular Thursday morning at the store, just a week after the rainy day incident with the lost little girl. I was rearranging some of the newer pastries when the bell above the door chimed. I looked up, expecting another customer, but instead, I saw a well-dressed man I'd never seen before. He walked straight to me, his expression serious yet friendly. "Good morning," he greeted. "Are you Emma?" "That's me," I replied, a bit puzzled. "Can I help you with something?" "Yes, actually. I'm Thomas. I don't know if you remember, but you helped my daughter last week when she was lost. She hasn't stopped talking about how kind you were." I blinked in surprise, remembering the little girl's tight hug. "Oh, yes, of course. I'm just glad she's safe now. How is she?" "She's great, thanks to you," he smiled. "I actually came here to thank you personally and also to offer my help, if you ever need it." I was taken aback. "That's very kind of you, but I don't know what you could help with." Thomas handed me his card. "I'm a lawyer. I specialize in business and contract law. After what my daughter told me about how you treated her, I thought maybe if you ever need legal advice or anything, I could be of service." I stared at the card, then at Thomas. A lawyer could be useful, especially now. Actually, there might be something. But it's a bit complicated. Thomas nodded, gesturing toward a quieter corner of the shop. "I'm all ears." We sat down at one of the tables, and I briefly explained the situation with Janice and the store, how things had changed after the merger, my reduced role, and my father's situation. Thomas listened intently, occasionally nodding. "It sounds like you've been put in a tough spot. If you can get me the merger documents, I can take a look, see if there's anything that can be done legally to renegotiate your position or at least get you some more control." I fetched the documents from my file at home and brought them to Thomas the next day. He promised to look over them and get back to me as soon as possible. True to his word, a few days later, he called me into his office to discuss his findings. "Emma, I've gone through everything," Thomas began as soon as I sat down in his office. "There are a few areas where the agreement seems heavily biased against your father. It looks like there were some oversight and possibly misleading information when he signed." My heart pounded with a mix of anger and relief. "So, what can we do?" Thomas leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "We can challenge the agreement based on these discrepancies. It's not a guaranteed win, but it's a start. You have a right to fight this, Emma." I nodded, feeling the weight of the decision. "Let's do it. It's time I took a stand." After meeting with Thomas, my mind was a whirlwind of doubt and guilt. Was I doing the right thing by challenging my husband and his family? The thought of ruining their lives weighed heavily on me as I headed home. But as soon as I stepped through the door, the scene that greeted me swept all my doubts away. The house was bustling with noise and guests. It was our wedding anniversary, an event I had completely forgotten about in the midst of all the chaos. As I hesitated at the entrance, trying to process the celebration, Janice spotted me. Her face flushed from drink, she stormed over, her voice loud and slurring. "There you are! Wandering the streets when you should be here serving your guests," she shouted. I tried to apologize. "Janice, I'm sorry, But before I could finish, she hurled an empty plate in my direction. It smashed against the wall right next to my head, shards scattering across the floor. The room fell silent, all eyes on us. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of fear and rising anger. Then Michael staggered over, wine glass in hand. He sloshed the contents onto my hands and blouse. "Clean yourself up, you're a mess," he slurred, chuckling. Janice joined in the laughter, and a few of the guests murmured uncomfortably, not sure how to react. That was the last straw. I felt something inside me snap, the last thread of tolerance for this life I was living. I straightened up, wiping my hands on my skirt, my voice steady and loud. "Enough," I declared, silencing the room. "I've been to a lawyer, and I'm filing for a divorce." The shock was palpable. Michael and Janice froze, their smiles fading. "Who do you think you are?" Janice hissed, stepping closer. "I am someone who no longer accepts being treated this way," I continued, my voice clear and confident despite the trembling in my knees. "I am protesting the merger agreement. There has been fraud, and I've already sent the documents to the authorities and the court." I could see the fear flicker in Janice's eyes, her tipsy bravado slipping. "You can't do this to us," she stammered. "I also intend to seek financial compensation for all the abuse," I added, not letting her interrupt. I turned, heading upstairs to pack my things. Behind me, I could hear Janice scrambling after me, her tone suddenly changing to one of desperation. "Emma, please, let's talk about this. We can sort something out." I stopped at the top of the stairs, facing her one last time. Pulling out Thomas's business card, I held it out. "You can discuss it with my lawyer. From now on, that's how we communicate." Packing my bag was quick, I didn't have much I wanted to take from that house. With every piece of clothing, every personal item, I felt a bit more free. After what felt like an eternity of legal battles and emotional upheaval, the final court hearing was more than just a procedural event, it was the day I reclaimed my life and my family's business. Standing beside Thomas, my lawyer, I watched with a steely resolve as the judge delivered the verdict that would set everything right. "The court finds in favor of the plaintiff," the judge announced, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom. "It is clear from the evidence presented that the defendant engaged in fraudulent activities to secure control of the business. Therefore, the original merger agreement is hereby nullified, and full ownership rights will revert to the plaintiff and her father." Janice, my former mother-in-law, sat stiffly, her face unreadable. Beside her, Michael looked down, unable to meet my gaze. The court also imposed a hefty fine on Janice and ordered her to pay financial compensation, which conveniently matched the value of her shares in our business. It was more than justice, it was poetic. The business that my father and I had built with love and hard work was ours again, and Janice was out, forced to find employment elsewhere due to the financial ruin that her greed had brought upon her. Back at the store, Dad and I wasted no time in making changes. Replacing the generic fittings with our cozy decor, we brought back the community vibe that had defined our place in the neighborhood. As I reintegrated into the day-to-day operations, I also decided to pick up where I had left off with my education. Going back to college felt right. I knew now more than ever how important knowledge and education were, especially if I wanted to take our business to new heights. Life without Michael was strangely liberating. After the divorce, he had pleaded for forgiveness, hoping to salvage our marriage, but too much had happened, and my decision was firm. One day, a familiar face popped into the shop. The girl I had helped during the rainstorm came in, holding her mother's hand. She ran up to me as soon as she saw me, a bright smile on her face. "Miss Emma," she exclaimed, her voice echoing around the shop. "Hey there." I crouched down to her level. "How are you?" "I'm good. Mommy says we can get a big cake from here for my birthday." "Absolutely," I laughed, glancing up at her mother, who smiled warmly at me. "We'll make sure it's the best cake you've ever had." As they wandered off to pick out some pastries, I straightened up, watching them go. This was why I fought so hard. Not just for me or for my dad, but for these moments of joy and community. My name's Lana, just a regular girl who ended up pouring drinks at Joe's bar downtown after high school. It wasn't anything fancy, but it paid the bills and kept me busy. That's where I first laid eyes on Daniel. It was a Thursday night, the kind where the bar was buzzing but not too packed, just how I like it. In walked this guy, Daniel, with a few of his buddies. Right off, he stuck out. Not because he was loud or anything, he was the calm kind, the kind that had an easy smile and a look in his eyes that said he knew something you didn't. He sauntered over to the bar and took a seat right in front of where I was working. "Hey," he said, flashing that grin. "What's good here, besides the view?" I shot him a look. "Beer's cold, if that's what you mean," I replied, not letting on that I caught his cheeky compliment. His laugh was genuine, and it made me smile despite myself. "I'll take one then, and whatever you recommend for yourself. Let's make it two," he added. Pouring the drinks, I couldn't help but notice the way he watched me, not in a creepy way, but like he was actually interested in what I was doing. "So, you come here often?" I joked as I handed him the beers. "First time, actually. My friend said this place has the best service in town." "Guess they were right," Daniel said, his eyes not leaving mine. We chatted more than I usually did with customers. He told me about his college days, all fancy and full of big words I didn't bother to remember. And I told him about growing up here in town, how I always thought I'd do something more but never figured out what that more was. "You're interesting, Lana," he said out of the blue. "Not like the usual crowd in here." I raised an eyebrow. "Thanks, I guess. You're not too bad yourself, for a rich boy." He laughed again, that sound that filled up the space around us. "Rich boy, huh? Trust me, having money's not all it's cracked up to be." We got interrupted then by his friends, who were ready to move on to some club or another. He stood up, tossed a 50 on the bar, way too much for 2 beers, and winked. "Maybe I'll find that right company if I come back here." And just like that, he was gone, melting into the crowd with his friends. But something about him lingered, like the echo of his laugh in my ears, making me wonder if I'd see him again. Daniel started showing up at the bar every single night after that first encounter. At first, I figured he was just like any other guy, killing time with a beer and small talk. But then, the talks got longer and a whole lot more personal. He'd settle into his usual spot, and as I wiped down the counter or restocked the shelves, he'd tell me bits and pieces about his life, his family. "My dad's pretty big into politics," he'd say with a casual shrug, like he was talking about the weather, not dropping that his father was one of the state's top politicians. "And Mom, well, she's a housewife, keeps everything running smooth at home." The more we talked, the more I saw past the polished surface. Sure, he had money and a name that opened doors, but there was something else, something real that I couldn't quite put my finger on. And despite my better judgment, I found myself looking forward to those evenings when he'd show up. One night, it all changed. He came in looking serious, his usual smile nowhere in sight. "Lana, I've been thinking," he started, hesitating a bit. "How about we go out tomorrow? Somewhere nice, not just here." It was sudden, but not unwelcome. "Like a date?" I asked, trying to sound cool but feeling my heart thump a little harder. "Yeah, a date," he confirmed, his smile back as if he'd won some sort of victory seeing my reaction. That date led to another and another. Before I knew it, we were seeing each other every day. Daniel talked about his life, and I shared mine. He'd laugh off the differences, saying, "Wealth's my only drawback, you know." But it wasn't just his wealth. Daniel loved the high life, parties, late nights, the kind of leisure I could hardly imagine. He brushed off my concerns with a wave. "Things will change, Lana. You'll see." Then came the night he wanted me to meet his parents. I was a bundle of nerves. We drove up to their mansion, the kind of place you see in movies, with sprawling gardens and more rooms than you'd know what to do with. His mother, Mrs. Patricia Gilmore, was as chilly as the marble floors, sizing me up like I was something she'd found stuck to her shoe. "A waitress," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Really, Daniel, you expect her to fit into our world?" His father, Gerald Gilmore, however, beamed at me as if I was the first honest thing he'd seen in years. "Lana, dear, it's refreshing to see someone from real life. You're just what we need. A bridge to the common man, right before the elections." I didn't know whether to be flattered or offended. The dinner was tense, Mrs. Gilmore sniping comments under her breath, Mr. Gilmore countering with grand declarations about my refreshing simplicity. At one point, Mrs. Gilmore had enough, standing up so fast her chair almost toppled over. "I will not stand for this," she hissed, storming out of the room. Mr. Gilmore just winked at me across the table. "Don't you worry, Lana. Everything will be just fine." That wink was supposed to reassure me, but it felt like I was being swept into a game I didn't know how to play. Weeks later, Daniel got down on one knee, right there in the bar where we first met, with the same cheeky grin he had that first night. "Marry me, Lana, and let's show them all how it's done," he said. And I, lost in the moment and in him, said yes. The wedding was anything but the quiet affair I'd hoped for. From the moment Daniel popped the question, his father took over the whole show. He insisted on a grand ceremony, one that would be talked about far and wide. "It'll be perfect for the campaign," he'd say with a sly grin, every time I brought up keeping things small. So, there I was, standing in a dress fancier than anything I'd ever owned, with cameras flashing in my face as I tried to keep my smile from faltering. The reporters swarmed around us, and Mr. Gilmore relished every moment, playing the gracious father-in-law to perfection. "See, folks, this is what real love looks like. Unity across different worlds," he announced to the cameras, slinging his arm around me a little too tightly. I glanced over at my parents, sitting off to the side, their expressions a mix of awe and discomfort. They weren't used to this kind of spectacle, and frankly, neither was I. Mrs. Gilmore, decked out in a dress that probably cost more than my dad's car, pasted on a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She leaned in during the photo op, whispering through clenched teeth, "Smile, Lana. Today, we're all family." After the spectacle, Daniel and I moved into a luxury apartment, a stark contrast to my modest childhood home. It was a wedding gift from his parents, lavish and sprawling, located in one of the city's most exclusive buildings. Daniel's nights out with his friends became more frequent, and I found myself alone in our expansive living space more often than not. His mother, Mrs. Gilmore, took it upon herself to drop by unannounced, always with a critique ready at her lips. One such afternoon, she found me trying to straighten up the mess from one of Daniel's late-night gatherings. She surveyed the room with a disdainful eye before fixing her gaze on me. "Lana, this isn't some roadside diner. You need to keep a better eye on Daniel. Look at him, he's out all the time, drinking, and it's your job to rein him in." I bristled at her words, my hands clenching the dishcloth tighter. "And what exactly do you suggest I do, Mrs. Gilmore? Chain him to a chair?" Her lips thinned into a line. "Don't be smart, Lana. You need to take control. Otherwise, you're just as much to blame." The air was tense between us, the only sounds the soft tick of the expensive clock on the wall and the distant hum of city life outside the windows. That night, when Daniel came home, I tried to talk to him about it. "Your mom thinks I'm not doing enough to keep you in line," I said, trying to keep my voice even. Daniel's reaction was immediate and heated. "You gonna listen to her? Let's not let her get between us, okay? I love you, Lana. We'll figure this out together." But as the weeks rolled on, nothing changed. Daniel's assurances felt more and more hollow, and I found myself questioning whether love was enough to bridge the chasm that seemed to be widening between us. Living the high life wasn't all it was cracked up to be, not by a long shot. I found myself constantly tidying our massive apartment, cooking meals that often went cold before Daniel got home, and hustling laundry to and from the cleaners, all while holding down my shifts at Joe's bar. Meanwhile, Daniel, with no job on his horizon, seemed content to blow through his hefty allowance on nights out with his friends. Daniel's mother, the queen of high society gossip, made sure everyone knew her twisted version of our life. According to her, I was the villain, a dumb, greedy woman who led her poor son astray with my low-class ways. It was a normal day at the bar when she decided to bring her highfalutin friends for a casual lunch. The moment they strutted in, I knew I was in for it. They perched at the bar, their noses turned up like they smelled something foul. Mrs. Gilmore waved me over with a flick of her wrist, her voice loud enough to turn a few heads. "Lana, darling, could you hurry up? We don't have all day, and we expect proper service even in this establishment." Her friend snickered, their eyes scanning the bar with barely disguised contempt. I forced a smile, taking their orders while my hands itched to dump a tray of drinks right into their laps. "Make sure the glasses are clean, dear. We wouldn't want to catch anything," one of her cronies quipped, her laughter sharp as shattered glass. "Yes, ma'am," I replied, my tone syrupy sweet. I delivered their drinks and food with a smile plastered on, though inside I felt anything but cheerful. As I passed by with another order, Mrs. Gilmore grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "You know, Lana, it's a shame you don't use your husband's money to better yourself. Maybe some classes in etiquette? Or a seminar on how to be a supportive wife?" I pulled away gently, keeping my voice steady. "I appreciate the advice, Mrs. Gilmore. I'll give it all the consideration it deserves." The bar couldn't close fast enough that day. Each comment, each condescending look from that table, added weight to the growing dread that this was my life now, scrutinized and scorned, no matter how hard I tried. Back at our apartment, the silence was a stark contrast to the chaos at the bar. Daniel was out again, the note on the fridge a weak apology for missing dinner. I was left alone with my thoughts, which were as cluttered as the untouched plates on our dining table. Meanwhile, I started paying the bills from my own tips, because Daniel's idea of budgeting was seeing how quickly he could spend his money each month. Groceries, utilities, even the damn cable bill, I covered them all. His promises to get his act together and find a job were as empty as our conversations. The election season was in full swing, and Mr. Gilmore was more eager than ever to parade me around at every possible public event. He'd introduce me with great fanfare, always emphasizing how his son had married a simple girl from the people. At rallies, dinners, and interviews, I wore my smile like a mask, nodding and playing the part of the approachable daughter-in-law. But behind the smiles and the polite applause, I was weary. The constant scrutiny, the endless small talk with people who cared more about my story as a campaign tool than as a person, it was exhausting. More than once, I found myself eyeing the exits at these events, longing for nothing more than to run out and never look back. One evening, after yet another fundraiser that had stretched on for hours, Mr. Gilmore pulled me aside, his hand gripping my shoulder a little too firmly. "Lana, I need you to keep this up. You know, your cooperation is crucial. Remember, your lifestyle, this apartment, it's all thanks to our support." I nodded, the thread in his tone clear as glass. "Of course, Mr. Gilmore. I understand." It wasn't just the campaign that was putting pressure on me. Things at home were no better. Daniel's behavior had escalated from neglect to outright destructiveness. He'd come home late, if he came home at all, often drunk and sometimes barely able to stand. Then came the night that changed everything. Daniel stumbled through the door well past midnight, his face ashen, eyes wild with panic. He collapsed onto the sofa, his hands shaking. "Lana, I've screwed up," he blurted out, his voice a hoarse whisper. "I owe money, a lot of money. To some really bad people. I lost it at the casino, and they're not the type to wait for their cash." My stomach twisted at his words. "How much?" "70,000, he murmured, looking away. I felt cold all over. $70,000? He nodded, miserable. "I need your help, Lana. Please, I can't ask my parents. They'd disown me." The desperation in his eyes was something I couldn't ignore. He grabbed my hands, his grip tight. I swear, Lana, if you help me with this, I'll change. I know I've been a terrible husband, but I'll do anything to make this right. Please. Something in me broke then. Despite the anger and the disappointment, I couldn't let him face this alone. Okay, Daniel. I'll help you. But this is it. You have to turn things around. I took out a loan the next day, $70,000 that felt like a noose around my neck. But as I handed the money over, Daniel was like a man reborn. He helped around the house, cut back on the drinking, and for a brief, fleeting moment, I let myself believe that we could actually make this work. We spent evenings together, talking about plans for the future, even daring to dream about starting a family. Daniel was attentive, helping with chores, sharing meals at the same table, things we hadn't done in years. Maybe we should think about having a kid, he suggested one night as we cleaned up after dinner. I looked at him, surprised but not unhappy at the thought. Really? You think we're ready? He smiled, pulling me close. Yeah, I do. I mean, we're getting back on track, right? A fresh start. I wanted to believe him, to believe in us. And in those moments, it was easy to imagine that everything could actually be okay, that the debts and lies were behind us. But that illusion shattered the night I came home from a double shift at the bar. Tossing my keys on the counter, I headed for the bedroom, my body aching for just a few hours of sleep before doing it all over again. But the scene I walked into snapped me wide awake. Daniel was passed out on our bed, snoring loudly, with two girls I'd never seen before curled up beside him, both just as unconscious. Bottles and glasses littered the nightstand, the stench of alcohol heavy in the air. My heart hammered against my ribcage as a cold rage settled in my gut. Without thinking, I pulled out my phone and started recording. The camera's light cut through the darkness, capturing the damning scene. I nudged Daniel awake, my voice sharp. Daniel, who are these girls? He blinked up at me, confused and still drunk, then waved a dismissive hand as if brushing away the question. They're just my girlfriends, you know? It's not a big deal. We do this sometimes when you're at work. That was it. The final betrayal. I stopped the recording, my hands trembling with a cocktail of emotions, rage, sorrow, disbelief. I stepped out of the room, dialed Mr. Gilmore, and waited for him to pick up. Lana? What's wrong? His voice was cautious, alert. Mr. Gilmore, I'm done. I just caught Daniel in our bed with two other women. I've recorded everything, and I want a divorce, I said, each word measured, heavy with finality. He was at the apartment within the hour, his face a mask of controlled fury as he glanced at the still unconscious figures in my bed. Daniel had woken up by then, looking sheepish and scared as his father berated him in hushed, vicious tones. You idiot! Look what you've done! Turning to me, Mr. Gilmore's tone softened. Lana, I'll handle this. Let's keep it quiet, for everyone's sake. What do you need? $500,000, the apartment sold and the money transferred to me, and the loan I took out for him cleared, I stated, each demand non-negotiable. Mr. Gilmore nodded slowly, calculating. Done. But you must agree to keep this quiet. Move away, start fresh somewhere else. Can you do that? Yes, I said simply. There was nothing left for me here, no reason to stay. And Lana, don't tell his mother. She'd make a scene, and we can't afford that now, not with the elections. The divorce papers came through quietly. I signed them in the dim light of dawn, alone. Mr. Gilmore kept his word. The money was in my account within days, the loan was paid off, and I was free from Daniel and his destructive whims. Settling into my new life in another city felt like breathing fresh air after being submerged underwater for too long. The day I moved into my new apartment in a peaceful neighborhood, I knew I had made the right decision. It was smaller than the luxurious prison I'd left behind, but it was all mine. The first thing I did after unpacking was block every number associated with my old life. Every ring was a potential drag back into that mess, and I wasn't about to let that happen. Then, I went out and bought myself a car. Nothing too fancy, but sleek and new, something just for me. A few days later, I landed a job as an administrator at a local restaurant. It was a step up from waitressing, with regular hours and no late nights. The owner, a wiry woman named Carla, with a sharp tongue and a no-nonsense attitude, took me under her wing. "You new to town?" Carla asked on my first day, eyeing me with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Yeah, just moved in," I replied, keeping my past tucked away like the folded boxes in my closet. Carla nodded, as if approving my concise answer. "Well, here's your desk, and here are your responsibilities. You keep things running smooth, and we'll get along just fine." "I appreciate it, Carla. I won't let you down," I promised, eager to prove my worth in this new role. The job was busy, filled with the usual chaos of restaurant life, but I thrived on the structure it brought to my days. I was making my own money, controlling my own fate. It felt good, honest and real. Encouraged by Carla's blunt but fair management style, I decided to enroll in the local college. I wanted more than just to escape my past, I wanted to build something lasting. Night classes in business management seemed like the right path, and stepping into the classroom, I felt a surge of pride. I was doing this for me, no one else. One evening, as I was locking up the restaurant, Carla stopped by my desk. "Heard you're hitting the books at night. That's good. Keep that brain working." I smiled, grateful for her recognition. "Trying to. Figured it's never too late to start fresh, right?" "Damn right," Carla said with a nod. "You ever need help, you let me know. I know a thing or two about keeping a business above water." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work, study, and the quiet solitude of my apartment. I relished the normalcy, the mundane moments that I used to take for granted. It was during one of these quiet nights, sitting on my balcony with a cup of tea, that I realized just how much I had changed. The city lights sparkled in the distance, each one a reminder of where I'd been and where I was heading. 2 years had slipped by since I cut all ties with my old life and started anew. I was sitting in my living room, cozy and warm, a book forgotten on my lap, when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, and hesitating for a split second, I answered. "Lana, this is Patricia Gilmore." The voice came through, high-pitched and frantic. "Daniel is in trouble because of your negligence." I was taken aback. "Mrs. Gilmore, slow down. What are you talking about? What trouble?" She was nearly breathless with agitation. "An unknown friend of Daniel called me. He said Daniel got into a fight with a policeman in a bar. I had to transfer money to keep him out of jail. I took it from our savings, and Gerald doesn't know yet." "Why weren't you there for him?" "Mrs. Gilmore, listen to me very carefully," I said, my voice calm and clear. "Daniel and I have been divorced for 2 years. I haven't seen or spoken to him since." There was a pause, and then, "Divorced? What are you talking about? Why didn't anyone tell me?" "You didn't know because it was meant to be kept quiet for the family's sake, for the election and all. I'm sorry you were left out, but I am no longer part of Daniel's life or your family." "And what happened to the policeman and Daniel?" Her voice cracked, and I could hear the confusion and fear seeping through. Laughing softly, I tried to find some humor in the absurdity of the situation. "Mrs. Gilmore, you've been scammed. There's no doubt about it. These scammers probably made up the whole story about the policeman just to trick you out of your money." There was a pause on the line as the realization sank in. Her voice quivered, fear replacing the anger from moments before. "Scammed? Oh no, what have I done?" Her tone was frantic, the weight of her mistake crashing down. "Can't you just lend me some money to put back before Gerald finds out?" "Please, Lana." "Mrs. Gilmore, I can't. It's not my place anymore. I've moved on. You need to handle this with your family," I replied, firm yet not unkind. Her crying intensified, then turned to anger. "You could help, but you choose not to. You're just as selfish as everyone said." I sighed, a deep, weary release. I'm sorry you feel that way. I truly hope you sort this out, but I must go now. I hung up before she could reply, her sobs echoing in my ear even after the line went dead. Looking around my peaceful apartment, the stark contrast between my current life and the chaos of the past made me shudder. I picked up my phone again, this time navigating through the settings to block yet another number. As I set the phone down, a sense of finality washed over me. I was truly free now, no longer entangled in the web of deception and greed that had once defined my life.